But the AI chip leader will have a chance to shine this week as it kicks off its annual GTC Developers Conference today, with CEO Jensen Huang giving the keynote tomorrow. Analysts expect him to showcase a revved-up version of the new Blackwell chip and are hoping to hear more about the next-generation chip called Rubin. Let's bring in Jordan Klein, tech, media, and telecom sector specialist and desk-based analyst at Mizuho. Jordan, I read your note every morning, so I know you've been getting ready for this big GTC Developers Conference. What's the number one thing you want to hear from Jensen Huang?
Well, it's a great question, Seema, and thanks for having me. I don't know if there's number one key thing that everyone wants him to say. I think you previewed it well. It's going to be all about the new products. Some of the things that I think people would want to hear is probably something he's not going to talk about, and that's more the macro, China restrictions, specific spending levels by, their big cloud hyperscalers. Those are just things they don't really talk about. They do have a meeting with investors, I think on Wednesday, middle of the day, where the CFO and Jensen will address Wall Street analysts. That I think will actually be pretty important. But as you said, all the focus is going to be on the new products, when they come out. Maybe if he can address the ability to get these products to the customers at a more expedited pace. That is something I think a lot of people are worried about, because ultimately what's going to drive the stock is the ability to upside numbers and revise or guide higher. And to do that, they have more demand than supply. They just can't get the product to the customer fast enough.
So if he does detail supply issues once again, but says that demand is remaining very strong for not just Blackwell, but then the next iteration, which is Rubin, how do you think the market responds?
Well, I think he's gonna probably talk specifically to, we've got tons of demand. The demand I think he's going to address more specifically, that's broadening beyond just the core customers they have now. I think a lot of people are very interested to hear, are you getting demand from the sovereign side, these large multinational, governments, that sort of thing. But I do think he's going to probably address, to the extent their ability to improve some of these challenges they faced in the supply chain. I know the CFO on the earnings call spent time saying, we're working very closely with all of our suppliers. They're doing a great job. So I ultimately think that the expectation is a lot lower this year into GTC than it was in the past years. But that doesn't mean it's super low and the bar is low. I think they still have a lot they have to say. But I do think the setup is a little bit, people aren't expecting some, big move higher in the stock. So maybe you get a little bit more surprise on that fact alone.
I know you don't expect him to touch on export controls, but given that there's this big question mark around China, especially in light of DeepSeek revelations, the Chinese in general being able to build a cheaper, more cost-effective AI model, how do you think he addresses that, either directly or indirectly?
That's another great question. I think so far, a lot of companies that are, on their earnings calls are getting this question from investors. And the definitive, clear answer, and I think this is what you'll hear from NVIDIA, is that the DeepSeek and this innovation out of China and other methods to train faster and less expensive, that's going to basically, he's going to say that's driving more potential consumption and demand, that's a positive. I still think this conference and what they say is going to be all about their performance lead over everyone else out there in the semi-training and inference world. And I think that is important, that they sustain this large lead on performance. But I do think he's going to say the market is going to basically get larger and bigger because of this DeepSeek innovation. And I actually believe that's probably the case.
Look, this is a celebration week. It's NVIDIA week. The conference that they're having has often been a reset, I'd say an anchor reset of what people should be looking for. We've really just been talking about China for a very long time. Let's talk about what NVIDIA's got and whether China's actually positive, because I think that it's been viewed as negative for the ever since DeepSeek Monday, whatever. David, what's really going on out here, I think, is that everybody wants to talk about AI, whether it be Papa John's, who I'm talking to, whether it be Block, whether it be Snowflake. I've got ARM Holdings, I've got Dell, I've got Cisco, but then we get to Home Depot. I hope they actually want to talk about the planning season. And then we have Wynn, which I hope they want to talk about China and gambling. So it's a full week. Trying to get the temperature of the place and what's really going on out here. And I got to tell you, David, I always feel you have to get out of New York to find out what people are talking about. And I can't wait to talk to these people because I don't even know what they're going to say.
Yeah, I know. And listen, you're going to get a lot of important insights, I think, in terms of AI. My guess is you're going to get an even better sense, Jim, as to how quickly the technology continues to advance and how there is no let-up in terms of potential spend. That would be my guess. Obviously, you're also going to have an important guest as well, I believe, on Wednesday. That would be Mr. Huang himself, correct?
Yeah, look, I think that I want to go to the old days when he's a visionary and not when he just plays defense against whatever administration is talking about China and the rivalry with China. I mean, I think those are all inside baseball. David, those are spring training. We got to go back to the World Series of thought that I always thought Jensen played at. And what I look forward to is actually talking to him about what he thinks in the next 20 years, because he views things in a 20-year time frame. Most of us view things about, I don't know, between here and the next commercial.
Yeah, that's true. Although, I mean, it's not going to be 20 years before we get to so-called AGI, Jim. I am curious for you to start to query a lot of the people you meet out there. And again, the definition of what that really means, artificial general intelligence. But, I mean, any number of different columns of late dealing with the fact that we are getting closer and closer and moving ever faster towards that.
Well, it's so biased.
And after that, I don't even know what comes. Like, once you get past that, which could be within, who knows, a year, 2 years, 3 years, depends who you talk to. I don't know what 15 years after that looks like.
No, I know, and I think that what we're really trying to figure out is how much it is thinking. How much is Grok thinking? What kind of memory does ChatGPT have? Can we twist and turn their answers by asking the wrong questions? And I think how to query any one of these sites is what's going to really matter. And I think that a lot of us don't know how to query them correctly. I think Jensen can really explain to us how we're supposed to ask, because I think sometimes we ask and we get fifth grade answers, and sometimes we ask and we get graduate school answers.
Yeah, although, as you well know, it's going to be sort of in the enterprise, the agentics world that we're all entering into, the ability to do so many different things and create so much efficiency. How many coders are going to be replaced? The broader implications. Jim, let's get to the markets.
Well, NVIDIA kicking off its GTC conference today. Jensen Huang expected to deliver a keynote tomorrow night. Joining us now is Melius research analyst Ben Reitzes. He has a $170 price target on NVIDIA and a buy rating on the stock. Ben, it's good to have you here to kind of set things up. I mean, you suggest that Jensen Huang should be able to reassure investors on the big picture vision here. What do you think the hurdles are? What are the bogeys for sort of what he has to persuade investors of at this point?
Well, this time last year, the key thing was that it gives you confidence in the growth for the next year. So what we're looking for is things that help us know the long-term growth path a little better. Stuff like how much data center infrastructure is needed to support robots, autonomous vehicles, and then the new product roadmaps, like going all the way out through 2027. We should actually hear about the Blackwell Ultra, but then next year we get Rubin, and then hopefully he'll preview what's after that. This is usually a real mecca for AI, and we think a lot of partners will be there. So hopefully it gives investors a better feel for long-term growth. However, the short term, too, with all the worries, we should be able to get some good checks on demand.
Yeah, I guess there's a big debate, too, as to whether the DeepSeek announcement and the quick rethink of how long the runway might be for the very CapEx-intensive part of this AI build-out, whether it's going to just put a lid on valuations in general or, essentially keep these stocks on a shorter leash. You mentioned, and as I've discussed this before, the way Apple traded after the introduction of the iPhone, and the market quickly said, well, they're over-earning. They can't keep this up. This is a hit-driven, massive kind of hardware cycle that we can't extrapolate into the future, and the stock got really cheap. How does that bear on NVIDIA here?
Well, very similar in our opinion because they're an industry pioneer and they earn a huge portion of the industry's profits. And I think that over time, NVIDIA is going to have similar things as Apple, where they have to transition a bit more towards software. So I think Jensen's also going to announce a lot of software advancements, his NIMS and Cosmos architectures for building. And I think that those things will help drive their software revenue through consumption over the long term, which could help drive their multiple. I think right now the multiple vis-a-vis its growth rate is pretty ridiculously cheap. So the market's sitting there saying, hey, there's going to be a downward revision at some point because no one can keep up this kind of hardware growth rate because of the, just a risk of an overbuild. And I think the degree to which he sets up that what's akin to the Apple services, the software business, the ecosystem, the DGX cloud instances that create that recurring revenue over the long term really is the key to this multiple. They're the only semis company that can really do this and make that transition. And we have a lot of confidence in Jensen. He really obviously gets it a lot better than we do.
I mean, I know you've made the point, Ben, that I think the stock's trading, 40% lower in terms of a forward PE multiple than it was at the introduction of ChatGPT, right? Or right around the launch time.
Yeah, that's right, David. It was around 40 times earnings plus when ChatGPT was announced. Now, obviously, they've seen thousands of percents of gains in their net income, et cetera. But the funny part is it is cheaper, in that mid-20s multiple, even on this year's earnings, showing that folks are really worried about the long-term growth rate decelerating quite a bit. And I think that this is the kind of show where we get more confident in the long-term growth rate because all these partners are going to be there. You're going to see that this guy drives the industry, this company drives the industry, and it's almost irreplaceable, obviously. So we're hoping to get that good feel and hope we hear a lot more about their TAM, which is pretty open-ended.
Yeah, I mean, with so many of these stocks, positioning and sentiment has played a big role, I feel like. I mean, Intel, for instance, up another 8.25%. Speaking of just off this new CEO announcement. So I wonder what your clients, what you're hearing about NVIDIA at this point and how much has changed over the last few weeks, given the sell-off.
Well, it's all about whether right now there's a lot of worries around the Trump administration keeping the AI diffusion rules, potentially banning sales into China, and then obviously disrupting the economy, which then, God forbid, any of the hyperscalers change any CapEx plans. NVIDIA obviously would be hit, along with many others. And that's really the cloud that needs to be lifted. We wrote kind of tongue-in-cheek that we were hoping Donald Trump would show up and just say, hey, all's clear. But I think those issues will linger. So I think that, unfortunately, that's going to create a little bit of a multiple hit on the stock until we clear it. But we should clear it, by next year. I mean, there should be some rules of the road.
Yeah, so the cloud, you're waiting for that to lift as to whether these guys keep up the spending. All right, Ben, enjoyed the show. Thanks a lot for helping us out with it. NVIDIA kicking off its developers conference today. The street is largely bullish ahead of the event. This as the semis come off their first positive week in 4. Christina Partsinevelos is here with more on what investors should be watching. Hi, Christina.
Hi, Mike. Well, you may have already missed the boat. GTC, the GPU tech conference for NVIDIA's seasonality, suggests that NVIDIA shares typically rise in the weeks leading into the event, while the relative performance post-GTC consistently lags. And this year is a little different. Much of the products like Blackwell Ultra, new racks, co-packaged optics, next-gen Rubin are largely already expected. And with tech stocks, notably semiconductors, not trading on fundamentals today, Cantor Fitzgerald says, quote, they are not sure Jensen can really say anything that would completely shift the market course and overcome investor fears about macro geopolitical uncertainty. Mizuho bets the stock actually stays range-bound until May earnings. Historical data, though, from Wells Fargo reveals a striking pattern for NVIDIA. So NVIDIA has pretty much outperformed the SOX index by 6.5 percentage points on average during GTC week over the past 5 years. So things have been going pretty well, this week. However, these gains have proven fleeting. Look 1 month out, the average return post-GTC for NVIDIA sits at negative 1.6%. The stock, though, enters this GTC week with one notable advantage. Shares currently trade at a valuation discount of around 35% relative to its median foreign price to earnings multiple over 3 years. So everybody's talking about how cheap this is, but the valuation drop is rare, very rare at the start of a product cycle. Bernstein notes, quote, investors have historically done well to buy the stock at 25 times or lower with an average 150% next year return with relative limited downside. So a bullish call from them. But the bottom line is you may have already missed the boat if you're looking at, daily trades and pre-event gains, but the current valuation suggests any post-announcement dip could be your chance to buy before the next rally, should there be a big one.
Please leave a like on this video so more people will see it. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.